after your death are things which are counted for you. As the Prophet ﷺ had said, إِذَا مَاتَ ابْنُ آدَمْ انْقَطَعَ عَمَلُهُ إِلَّا مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ. When a son of Adam, when a human being, when they die, their actions are cut off from them, except for three things. عِلْمٌ نَافِعٌ يُنْتَفَعُ بِهِ وَوَلَدٌ صَالِحٌ يَدْعُو لَهُ وَصَدَقَةٌ جَارِيَةٌ. Beneficial knowledge that people can use, a righteous child that will make dua for you, and a gift or a charity which is given in perpetuity. And all three of these are related. Because if you don't take the time to educate your family about what the obligation is for them to obey Allah and His Messenger in the wealth that you leave behind, it's going to create resentment, and they're most likely not going to make dua for you. And if you'll notice that when we have funerals in our community, many families are left scrambling, trying to find out what they should do at the most important moment of your life, or the most important of the moment at the end of your life, when they should be making dua for you. They're scrambling to find out what it is that you wanted them to do after your death. So we're going to talk a little bit about this imperative and some of the issues that are related to it. Now, this is the disclaimer to say that I'm not here tonight to give you any financial information, to give you any legal advice. This is completely for information purposes. Myself, any companies, any entities, any nonprofits that I'm associated with, this is all for information's purposes. What we want to do tonight is empower you to make the decisions, to live your Islam in your daily life. Now, every single one of us is born and we have hopes, we have dreams, we have aspirations and ambitions. The Prophet ﷺ was sitting, and this hadith is narrated in the Sunan of Abi Dawood, that the Prophet ﷺ was with his companions, and he took a stick and he drew a line in the sand. And he said, "This is man, هذا الإنسان." And then around that he said, "And وَهَذَا الْخَارِجُ مِنْهُ أَمَلُهُ." And this thing that's jutting out from him are his hopes. وَهَذَا أَجَلُهُ قَدْ أَحَاطَ بِهِ أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم أو محيط به في رواية. And this is his lifespan, which has encompassed him. Notice that our hopes and our aspirations and our ambitions are always greater than the actual time that we have allotted. We think we're going to live forever. We plan as if we're going to live forever. And in fact, let me be more audacious and say we don't plan as if we're going to live forever. Which is why we're always, every Ramadan, instead of spending all of our time in ibadah and taraweeh and sawm and qiyam, we have hostage-taking situations for fundraisers in the masjids. Why? Because we as community haven't taken the months before Ramadan to plan to make sure that our community is taken care of as a whole. That each and every one of us has a personal responsibility to take care of. Why? Because we think, we've got enough time in the future. We do this as a community, we do this as an individual. I won't have to educate my kids, I've got enough time. I won't have to save for my retirement, I've got enough time. I don't need to write a will, I've got enough time. I don't need to have a conversation with my children about my death because I've got enough time. And I'm going to give you tonight actual, real-life examples of why you should realize that you don't have enough time. These are cases that myself and my partners have actually dealt with. So the Prophet ﷺ said, وَهَذَا أَجَلُهُ مُحَاطٌ أَوْ قَدْ أَحَاطَ بِهِ. This is his lifespan that has encircled him. And these are al-a'rad. These are the setbacks that come in life. In asabahu, in akhta'ahu hada, asabahu hada. If he misses this setback, he's hit by another. And if he's hit by one setback, then another one misses him until he passes away. Now the Prophet ﷺ here was trying to let us understand that this finite life that we have, this temporal life, is just that. It's not going to last forever. And we have to realize that this box that we live in is one in which we must take action. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in many different verses of the Quran, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ, every soul shall taste death. The moment we start to understand that death is a reality, then we will live for it. وَجَاءَتْ سَكْرَةُ الْمَوْتِ بِالْحَقِّ ذَلِكَ مَا كُنْتَ مِنْهُ تَحِيدٌ. And the drunkenness of death comes to you. That is what you were avoiding. Even the Prophet ﷺ, بِعُلُوِّ شَأْنِهِ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ, with his lofty position with Allah, at the time of death, would take a cloth soaked in cold water, wipe his brow, and say, inna lil mawti sakarat. Death has a stupor, it has a drunkenness to it. He sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and then he would say, ila rafiq al-a'la, to the highest companion, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So even the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam was affected by death. How much more so then for one of us? Which is why he alayhi salatu wasalam encourages us frequently, and he said, أكثروا من هذم اللذات أكثروا من ذكر الموت أكثروا من ذكر هذم اللذات أكثروا من ذكر الموت أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Remember what destroys your pleasure. Remember death. So it's not the most lovely conversation to have. Why? Because we don't like to think of it. I read a quote today. Someone said that, 100 years ago, children would never see another child born. They would never witness a birth. And they would never understand the birth of a child. But they would sit at the deathbed of their loved ones, and they would witness their loved ones dying. And nowadays, it's almost impossible to find people who are around their relatives while they are dying. But yet, they witness birth at the youngest of ages, whether it's in school or whether their family has them there. So things have, priorities have changed, and the ideas of preparing for the next life has changed. So this brings me to the point of we have to have a very, very necessary conversation with ourselves about death. This conversation, we should be planning for what's going to happen to us and our families and our wealth after we die. And this is not something which is strange. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, radiyallahu anhu, the companion of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, in this hadith is recorded by Bukhari in his Sahih, that he, radiyallahu anhu, thought he was on his deathbed. And so he was in Mecca and he fell ill. And while he was in Mecca, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam visited him. And so Sa'd said, Ya Rasulullah, inna li malun kathir, wa mali illa ibnatun wahida. أَفَأَتَصَدَّقُ بِمَالِي كُلَّهُ? O Messenger of Allah, I only have one daughter, and I have a lot of money. So should I give away all of my money? The Prophet ﷺ said, no. He said, should I give away 2/3 of it? He said, no. Should I give away half of it? He said, no. Should I give away 1/3 of it? He said, الثُّلُثُ وَالثُّلُثُ كَثِيرٌ. You can give away 1/3, but 1/3 is still much. لأن تترك أهلك أغنياء خير من تتركهم عالة يتكففون الناس. For you to leave your family wealthy is better than for you to leave them dependent, begging of people. Note a few things about this conversation. Number one, Sa'd, he had a misconception about caring for his children. He thought he should just leave the children, they'll be cared for, and give away all of his money, because he was razor focused on his akhirah. He thought he was going to die soon. But just because you're focused on your akhirah doesn't mean that you deny anyone else their rights to the wealth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself has left behind. And here the Prophet ﷺ said that we are only allowed to carve out from what we leave behind 1/3 at most to give away in charity or as gifts to those who do not inherit. The point here is that this conversation happened. So you have to talk about these 5 things that are here on the screen. Number 1, talk to your family and tell them, I have an estate plan, or I have a will. Do you know what the most worrying thing is for people when you die will be? Oh my God, where did he leave the paperwork? Right? Does he have a safety deposit box? Did he stick it under his pillow? Like, is that shoebox that's in the closet, does that have it in there? Your family will tear up your house looking for everything. So you have to number 1, tell them, I have an estate plan. And this is where it's kept. Let someone know. Now, you might not want to tell everyone, but you're going to want to tell some people in your home so that they know where to access things, excuse me, when things go bad. Next, these are my health proxies. Did you sign anything that says that maybe I didn't die, but I'm incapacitated, or I'm comatose, or I can't make decisions on my own? How is my family going to make decisions for me? I live in Houston. I live outside of Houston, Texas. We have one of the largest medical centers in the United States. We have people who come from all over the world for medical treatment. And regardless of where they're from, I get at least one call every month asking, what do we do in this situation? My mother, my father, my aunt, my brother, my wife, my husband is in some situation where they can't make a medical decision on their own. I don't want to be guilty, but I also don't want to do something that they wouldn't have wanted me to do. What's the best way that you can do that? By having a health proxy and actually telling your family what it is you want them to do. Talk to them about what the quality of life means. This is what it means to me. For example, we had a grandmother in our family, very explicit. Something happens to me, don't you dare stick a tube or a needle in me. You allow me to go the way that Allah brought me into this life, you allow me to go out of it like that. I didn't come in with tubes, I'm not going out with tubes. Now, she never wrote it down, but mashallah, she could talk. And so she told like at least 50 people in the family. So the doctors had no doubt about what her intentions were, even though she never wrote it down. Talk to your family about what it means to you to have a quality of life. What are your thoughts on life support? Do you want to be on life support or not? And then after you have these decisions, you make these decisions, you have these discussions, there's something called mirroring, right? And that is when I speak to you, I say, I said that when I pass away, I don't want any life support or artificial support. And then what did you hear? And then you would say, responding, I heard you say you don't want any artificial life support. Now it seems simple. But when you do this with your loved ones, because you know what's happening when you tell them, you're sitting there going, and I don't want life support, and my will is in my shoebox, and I've got, and he just, mind is racing. I don't know, what am I going to do? Oh my God, how am I going to live without my family? How am I going to live without my father? Who am I going to tell? Where are we going to pray Jannah? This person's mind is racing. You want to make sure that, did you understand what I said? Yes, you did. Okay, tell me back. That registers with it. And this is a very beneficial method to use, not even when you're simply talking about these difficult topics, even with spouses, husbands and wives, right? Honey, can you go and pick up some milk? Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, I need you to reiterate to me, what did I say? You want some stuff from the store? No, I want milk. What kind? 2%. Okay, organic. No. You get the point. So what is the estate planning process? Excuse me. As Muslims, here's the challenge. In Muslim majority countries, it is sufficient for you to not write certain things down because the family law of your Muslim majority country already dictates what's going to happen. There's no question about it. In the Sharia, these topics are generally held or dealt with in one way or another in the books of fiqh and Islamic legal heritage, but they're disparate. They might happen, for example, you don't have to write down the fact that you need all of your debts paid off because that's the custom and the law. You don't have to write that your funeral costs because most of our graveyards in Muslim majority countries are what? They're awqaf, they're waqf, they're endowments, right? So that's not a cost. Again, your advice to relatives, we'll talk a little bit about that later. There's a long tradition amongst the scholars and the common people of Islam where they would give advice to their relatives in something that they called a wasiyah. But that is just a convention, a customary name. It doesn't only include that. You want to create trusts for people to hold the money of your minor children. You want to distribute your inheritance the way that as some of the Salaf said, no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was not pleased to allow anyone to divide up the inheritance except himself, which is why he revealed it in the Quran. You want to divide up that third that we talked about in the hadith of Sa'd. And you want the guardianship of your children to be taken care of. If I pass away, my spouse. If both my spouse and I pass away, who takes care of my children? These are all things that are handled separately in most Muslim majority countries. Now, for us here in the United States, however, if we don't have an estate plan that covers all of these topics, then what's going to happen is someone's going to make a decision. And generally, if you don't make that decision during your lifetime, then some judge at a county court, at a probate court, is going to make that decision for you. And is going to appoint someone to make those decisions for you and your family. Might not be somebody that you like at all. Might not even be a person who's Muslim. So you have to make these decisions now. Excuse me. Why is it important to make these decisions? Why is it important to document things? Because if we don't, then not only are we subject to the improprietous decisions of people outside of our community, but even inside of our community. It's an actual case that I worked on. So there's a woman named Fatima, loving mother. She only had 2 daughters. She left behind a sizable amount of jewelry for her daughters. She used to buy gold jewelry during her lifetime and put it in a safe for her daughters, right? So her intention was always that it was going to be a gift. In some cultures, we have this jahez, whatever you want to call it, right? Where you prepare a marital gift for when your daughter is sent off for marriage. It's completely fine, right? Now, what happened is she said, you know what? I have all of this wealth here. My husband and I are getting older. We need to get an Islamic will. The husband said, no, I absolutely not. We'll not get an Islamic will. Why? Because it's going to be unfair to the girls. Right? This is a trope that it's propagated a lot of times. That for some reason, Islamic inheritance is unfair to women and gives men more. That's not the case at all. There are 7 main cases where people inherit. In 3 of those cases, women take more than men. In 1 case, men and women take equal. And in 3 other cases, the 3 remaining cases, women take less than men. Why? Because in those cases, they have a preemptive right to whatever the man takes in inheritance. So they get a fixed and a floating amount. They get the fixed amount from their percentage, and they have all of their maintenance paid for by their father or their brother or whomever is the male in that situation. Now, I wrote an article about that on my website that you can go to and refer to. We won't go into the details of it here. But needless to say, the idea of 2-to-1 as a ratio is not across the board. All right? And in many cases, women get much more than men in inheritance. Now, the father used that as a tool to take advantage of his own family. How? When his wife died, he never told his daughters about the jewelry. and he kept it all for himself. And they lived in a community property state. So what did that mean? If you live in a community property state, which are nine states in the United States, then by default, everything that you have earned or own after marriage will be split 50-50 down the middle. Right? So a lot of times people mention that, again, about the issues of men and women, but men take just as much advantage of this. So this man made away with his daughter's property, not just his wife's property. Right? What would have happened had he had an Islamic will? Well, first of all, the daughters would have taken 2/3 of the entire estate. Number two, the gold that was there would have been taken out of the inheritance. It wouldn't have been part of the inheritance. Why? Because it was a gift to them in their mother's lifetime. She was simply holding it as a trust, as an amana. And all property would have been surveyed by someone who's independent, not subjective to whoever is stronger in the family. So who's really unfair to the girls in this situation? And this draws to us the importance of estate planning. Why should you be, as a Muslim living in the United States, concerned about this topic? You should be concerned about it because it is one of the only ways that you will take care of the people that you love after you die. Your money will go to the people that you want it to go to, not who the state says or any of your relatives say. If you have personal goals that you want to see achieved, you can make those goals happen. Let's say, for example, you say, I've lived my life here in Culver City and in Los Angeles. I've benefited from Masjid Malik Fahad and from the school here. When I pass away, I want to give 10% of all of my wealth as a sadaqah jariyah for the masjid that I love. You can do that. Did you know as well, in the Muslim community, we always talk about fundraisers and building endowments and things like that. The average church and synagogue, 10% of their yearly expenses are paid for by the money they receive from people's wills. Because their members say, when I die, I'm going to give a little bit back to the masjid. So every time you sit in the masjid and you use the heater or the air conditioner, or you drink the water, or you're able to use any of the facilities, think about the Prophet ﷺ simply drinking cold milk on a hot Medina day with Abu Bakr and Umar in one of the farms of the Ansar. And he said to them, هَذَا مِنَ النَّعِيمِ الَّذِي تُسْأَلُونَ عَنْهُ. This is from the blessings that you will be asked about. How much more so then for one of the houses of Allah that for the most part we derive immense benefit from, and what we give back is not as much. Excuse me. Also, one thing that you can do with an estate plan is you can reduce the number of taxes that your family will have to pay if you have wealth that would be taxed at that time. So here are 4 major principles of getting this straight. You want to take feel free to take pictures of the screenshots that's up here. This is all public information. Number 1, understand yourself, your family, your budget, and your needs. A lot of times, the reason why we never write a will is because we don't know how much money we have. We don't know how much money we have because we're irresponsible with our money. We don't have a budget. And we've talked about budgeting here before, alhamdulillah. Number 2, understand the applicable laws. Do I live in a community property state? What is that? Do I live in a marital property state? What does that mean for the money that I leave behind? Do I need any extra documentation to bypass that or to create a caveat for that? What is it going to do to my wealth when I pass away? What do I have to have in place to be able to make sure that my family is able to access my wealth? Excuse me. Start early, get qualified legal help. And then remember the key principles of finance. Those are ownership, stewardship, agency, and accountability. Ownership, who owns it? Who owns it, and when they die, who does it go to? Stewardship, who's caring for it? And if they are no longer able to care for it, who should care for it after them? Agency. Who can I appoint to do something for me when I'm not around to be able to do it? And accountability. Will I be asked about all of this by Allah on the Day of Judgment or not? And the answer is an emphatic yes. The Prophet ﷺ said that the 2 feet of a human being will not move on the Day of Judgment until they're asked about 4 things. Your homework is find out what those 4 things are and how they relate to number 4 here. So what should a properly made estate plan do? Please take a picture of this this screen as well. It should delineate guardianship for your children. If you wish, it should give charitable gifts in your names to individuals or organizations. It should give advice, what's called a family directive, to your loved ones. Certain types of assets should be placed in a trust. So if you have minor children, your will should say, for my minor children who are under the age of 18, this money is placed into a trust. This is called a testamentary trust. It's created at the time of probate. And then whoever is the guardian of those children will then manage that trust for them. If you live in a community property state like California, then you want to make sure that if you don't want community property to apply, you've actually signed a document that says, don't apply community property to my stuff. That's very important because it makes it easier for you to divide up your inheritance, and it's less confusing to your administrators. It should dispose of your property as you wish. Follow your rule. And if your wish as a Muslim is to obey Allah and His Messenger, then it should contain the laws of inheritance. It should appoint a power of attorney in case of your physical or mental impairment. It should minimize estate taxes and inheritance taxes, and minimize settlement costs, legal and accounting fees. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذَا حَضَرَ أَحَدُكُمُ الْمَوْتُ إِن تَرَكَ خَيْرًا الْوَصِيَّةُ لِلْوَالِدَيْنِ وَالْأَقْرَبِينَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُتَّقِينَ. Prescribed for you. Allah has made this an obligation for you, O Muslim. Allah has made this an obligation for you, that when death visits one of you, that you leave, and you have something to leave behind, that you make a testament in favor of your parents and your family. An obligation for the muttaqi, for the person who is fearing of Allah, mindful of Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ said in Sahih al-Bukhari, it's not permissible for any Muslim who has something that they could write a will for, and yabita laylatain, for them to sleep for 2 nights, except that their will and testament is written and ready with him. So you should have this written down, and we're going to talk later about how to actually write that down. So these are the 6 things, 6 documents your estate plan should cover. Number 1, you should have a family declaration. Tells your family what it is that you want them to do after you die. Number 2, you should have a legally valid, Sharia-compliant will. Not just one that says, when I die, distribute my things Islamically. Do you know why you shouldn't have that? That's that simple? Because then it's going to go to the probate judge, and the probate judge is going to, you know what they're going to say? I don't even know what that means. I don't know what Islamic means. What does Islamic mean? And they're going to bring some expert from a university or something. Oh, in Islam, there are a lot of different madhahib, and there are a lot of different schools of thought, and the judge is going to go, I don't understand any of this. Apply state law. I don't have the time. And you think that's not the case. That happens in inheritance cases. It happens in business cases. It happens in a lot of different cases. Which is why one of the sunan of us doing business and creating agreements as Muslims is to write down our agreements and our intentions. The longest verse in the Quran is which verse? Ayat al-Dain, the verse about debt. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he said this verse is a foundation for all forms of transactions where someone owes anything to someone else. Not just for just debts in business. Anytime you're going to pass something on to someone, this verse applies. Write down your agreements. An advanced medical directive. You should be telling people what you want to happen if you pass away. A durable power of attorney, giving them the ability to make decisions for you if you can't. I'm going to show you in a moment an actual case of why that's important. A trust if needed. Here in California, a lot of people like to put their homes in trusts, right? It's not absolutely necessary, but it can be beneficial for you if needed. And then the marital property or the community property agreement that we said separates those obligations. So when you die, how is your money distributed? So the first thing that happens Islamically, the first thing that has to happen Islamically is that any debt you owe to anyone is taken out of the money that you leave behind and paid to those who it is owed to. And your funeral costs are also deducted and taken care of. Then you have the choice. See that part that says charitable gifts, the light blue? You don't have to give away anything from the money that you leave behind. I want to be extremely clear about that, okay? A lot of people come to me and they say, you know, I want to do good for people, but man, a third is a lot of money. Should I really give 30% or 33% of the money that I leave behind to just some local organization? You don't have to give anything. You can leave 100% of your money after funeral costs and debts. 100% goes to your inheritors. That's fine. But if you want to, you use that 1/3 to give to people who generally wouldn't receive from you. Like who? Like a childhood friend who's been supportive of you your whole life. Like a non-Muslim relative who won't receive from the percentages that are outlined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe you have a stepchild who you raised from infancy, but it's not your own, so they won't receive directly from you as a percentage. You can give them from that 1/3. You can give the masjid. You can give a favorite charity. You can say, take 5%, not 1/3, not 33%, take 5%, 2%, and go to my country of ancestry and dig wells for people to have clean water. The choice is yours. My point here is that it's a choice. So decide what type of sadaqah jariyah, as we mentioned, a charity that goes on forever is given, right? So if you want ajr and reward to come to you forever, take a little bit of that money from your will, give it to your local masjid, give it to a local charity, something that's going to continuously generate reward for you in the next life. So when we talk about funeral expenses and debts, all of your debts have to be paid before your inheritance is distributed. Why? Why would you want to do that? Because you don't want to go in front of Allah on the Day of Judgment, يَوْمَ لَا مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ, the day when there is no money and no children, right? There's no one's going to come and support you. There's not going to be any money that you can pay. And you owe someone something. Where is that something that you owe going to come out of? It's going to come out of your hasanat, your good deeds. And if you have no good deeds, what's going to happen? You're going to carry the sayyi'at, the bad deeds of someone else. So you don't want to get to that point, right? So you pay back people what they are owed. Again, funeral costs should be paid out. Question for all of the men. How many of you here have a muqaddam and a mu'akhar for your mahar? How many of you muqaddam, mu'akhar? So you paid the muqaddam, right? If you didn't pay the muqaddam yet, it's mashallah mabruk, you're still aris, right? But if you paid the muqaddam and you have a mu'akhar, how many even know what I'm talking about? So you have a what would we call it in English? You have a forward mahar, right? Where you pay, you give your wife something up front, and then you have something which is paid later, right? So it's a trap, guys. I was kidding. It's generally like, give me $5,000 now, and then mu'akhar, the paid in the future, $55,000, right? So you're living your whole life thinking, alhamdulillah, I got off easy. I only had to pay $5,000. That $55,000 is a debt that you owe to your wife, which you should be paying down. Okay? And women, when you get your marriage contracts, it should be stipulated in there that that debt is due. Why? So that you can exercise your right to that debt if necessary. Which means that it's known and written down, and when your husband, if he passes away, la qaddarullah, if he passes away, then you will be paid back that debt first before anyone else gets their money. Similarly, gentlemen, if you are in a situation where your wife is forced to spend on you or your family because you are unable to, she has the ability, shar'an, in the Sharia, to recuperate the costs of maintenance for herself and children and family and household that you were unable to pay. So be cognizant of that fact, all right? So if you have an unpaid balance, you should be trying to pay that down. Now, what I tell some people is what you should do is set up an IRA for your wife, okay? And then pay that mahar into the IRA. So not only is it out of your hands, but you can just set auto deduct like $250, $500, whatever it's going to be every month, and then eventually you've paid it off. And it's growing in investments for her, so that when you pass away, she already has access to it, and it's there in her old age. That's just an option. Charitable gifting. This is called wasiyah classically. Take a picture of this. This is restricted to 1/3. We've already talked about that. Anyone who's not an inheritor can take from the 1/3. Can be given to individuals, organizations, and charitable causes. What if I have an inheritor and I want to give them from the 1/3? Is that allowed? Yes, it is. The hadith and the Daraqutni and others that the Prophet ﷺ said, La wasiyyata liwarith. The 1/3 is not applicable to an inheritor. إلا إذا أجازته الورثة أو بقية الورثة أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. Only if the remaining inheritors approve of that. So what you do is you write in your will, right? You say, and for example, for my son, let's say, for example, you have a son who maybe didn't have as much success as the other children in life. You say, and for my son, I wish that, my car goes to him or X amount of money goes to him, right? And then you write a letter to the rest of your children, rest of your the inheritors, and you tell them, you know the situation of your brother, right? Don't stand in the way of my wishes of doing good, birrul walidain, for me after I pass, because you know the situation of his need as well as my desire to see this happen. And if they approve it, then it's allowed. If they don't approve it, however, what happens? Then others can give to him in proportion, but if one person doesn't wish to give, then they don't have to give it. Why? Because the inheritance is the property of the inheritor after death, not the person who left it. Excuse me. The remainder estate, take another picture of this. This is where the mawarith apply. This is where all of those ayat with all of those fractions, right? They apply. Now, every Ramadan we hear those ayats, and everyone says, I remember the first time when I finished studying Rahabiyya in the Masjid al-Nabawi, and we prayed Taraweeh that year, and I started hearing all of the ayat and mawarith, and it's like you're hearing a whole new Quran, right? Because now you understand what it's talking about. And if you're like, wow, I understand this stuff now, right? But it takes time and consideration. We don't have that kind of time tonight, unless you all would like to stay. Then maybe Shaykh Ahsan will do tahajjud, and then iftar or suhoor in the morning. I don't think everyone has that type of time tonight. Who cannot inherit from this portion of your wealth? Someone who murdered you, obviously, right? This is the three things. Someone who is enslaved, right? And someone who is of a different faith. These are three conditions that prevent a person from inheriting from you. Those that do inherit, there are quota-based inheritors, meaning that they take a percentage designated by Allah in the Quran. And then that's like a daughter taking half of all of her parents' wealth, right? A group of daughters taking 2/3 of all of their parents' wealth, right? A wife taking 1/4 of her husband's inheritance when there's no children, and so on and so forth. Now, what happens when you have someone else who inherits along with a quota-based inheritor? The Prophet ﷺ, he said, أَدُّ الْفَرَائِضَ لِأَهْلِهَا فَمَا بَقِيَ فَلِأَوْلَى رَجُلٍ ذَكَرٍ. Give the percentages to those who deserve them, and whatever is left is for the closest male relative. Okay? So if you only leave if you leave, for example, a daughter and an uncle, right? Then your daughter would take a half and your uncle would take the other half. Or if you say, for example, you left behind your daughter and your uncle and your mother, then your daughter would take half, and then your mother would take 1/3 or 1/6, and then your uncle would take what is left. I believe it's 1/3. Anyway, there are residual inheritors and quota-based inheritors. Now, this is a real story. This happened when I was in Florida back in the 90s. And after we talk about, everyone says this to me, but I don't have I don't even have a third of a dollar, much less a third of $100,000 to be able to leave to someone. Why should I care about writing a will? I don't have any money that I'm going to leave behind. I don't have anything of value. I don't own property. Why should this be important to me? Well, I'll tell you why. This was a young man who left his home. He was a student from overseas. He left his home. He was walking down the street, just taking a stroll, right? And while he was strolling through some back roads, hit by a car, flung into a ditch, body picked up by the city. Nobody knew who he was. So they kept him in the city morgue for 30 days. They would bring people in. Hey, anybody know this guy? No, we don't know him. Somebody finally said, where does he look like he's from? Oh, he looks like he's from this country. So they brought somebody in he's not from my country. He's from the country right next door. Oh, really? So how are we supposed to get? I don't know. Those guys, we're Christians. They're Muslims. Contact the Muslim people that are here. So they contact the Muslim community. All of this back and forth, they finally find out who this guy was. He was a guy named Muhammad. He was a student. He left his home without his identification, okay? And so the Muslim community says, okay, give us the body. We'll take the body and bury it. The city says, no, we can't do that legally. Why not? Because you're not next of kin. And he hasn't designated you in his will to release the body to. So his body sat for more than a month because a simple piece of paper didn't exist. And so one of the brothers who was, mashallah, may Allah continue to increase him, was quite wealthy, went to the city attorney and said, listen, I will pay all of the legal fees, and I will pay all of the funeral costs, and I will sign a waiver indemnifying the city of any wrongdoing. Just give us this young man's body so that we can give him a dignified burial. They said, oh, you're absolving us from any responsibility? Okay, here you go. And they released the body. We prayed janazah over him. So if you're saying to yourself, I don't have kids, I don't have money, I don't have property, you still have your body. And if you do not assign who will care for your body after your death, then if you have family members who don't agree with your wishes of how to be buried, then they will go and bury you any way that they see fit. And you might say, well, my family are Muslims. They'd never do that. Doesn't matter. I've seen cremations, right? I've seen all kinds of crazy things, right? So have a will even if you only have your body, which is still an amana from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are the requirements of a valid will? Number one, you have to be mentally competent when you write your will. You also cannot be under any undue influence from another person, which means when you write your will and you sign your will, you must sign your will in the presence of two adults who attest to the fact that you were not under duress or being forced to sign something. You have to do it out of your own volition, out of your own intention, your own niyyah. And your will must conform to your state's laws, which means it has to be drafted in a way that will agree with the state laws that you live in or the states that you may move to. Now, here's another case. Why is it important to have this documentation? This is one of my partners actually worked this case. They came into his office, wanted to create an estate plan. They were a very wealthy family, physician, doing very well for themselves, and they thought that the few $1,000s that they would have to pay to protect their multi-million-dollar home and their multi-million-dollar income was too much. Now, most of us won't fit into this, but I want to just show you how this can happen to anyone. The man's on call. He gets a call to go into the middle of the night back to the hospital. He's called in. While he's on his way to the hospital, drunk driver hits him. Immediately comatose, permanent vegetative state, no healthcare directives, no power of attorney, no will, nothing. They call his wife to the hospital. She doesn't know what to do. Unfortunately, like many Muslim women, her husband, although he provided financially, never took the time to teach her how to manage a checkbook, to give her access to the finances, to let her understand what was happening with their home. So all she knew was, I live at home and I have a credit card, right? And so now, no one's paying the credit card bills. Do you know why? Because she doesn't have access to the bank account to pay it. So she's running up credit, she tries to take out more credit cards, throwing herself into further debt. Guess what? The house isn't being paid because she doesn't know what to do. So it goes into delinquency. They say, you're going to have to sell this home. She goes, okay, how do I sell it? Do a short sale. She tries to initiate a short sale. What happens? She can't. Why? Because her husband's on the deed, and her husband is alive, but in a permanent vegetative state. So they say, ma'am, you have one of two choices. You either pull the plug, right, or you let the house default. She had to let the house default. So she was now, her and her daughters, on the street. A simple power of attorney would have allowed her to gain access to her husband's accounts, would have gained access to what would have allowed her and her family to at least remain in the place that was their homestead and remain protected. So having a will, having a healthcare directive, having a power of attorney is that important. And you might think to yourself, well, I don't expect to get hit by a drunk driver. How many of you here have gone to Hajj or are going to Hajj this year? I've gone to Hajj in the past. How many of you have gone to Umrah? How many of you are obligated to go to Hajj or Umrah at least once in a lifetime? Should see everyone's hand up, really, right? So when you go for Hajj and Umrah, you need to leave these type of documents with your family because you don't know what's going to happen. Not only do you need a power of, you say, well, I'm going to be at Hajj. Why would I need a power of attorney? Well, if you have bills to pay or you have children and your relative shows up at the hospital with your child without an authorization, they may not be able to get them the treatment that they need immediately, right? And you don't have, it doesn't have to be like you're signing your children away to somebody. You just say from this date to that date, my sister makes all medical decisions for my children, right, in these areas. That's it. But they're protected. So a durable power of attorney allows somebody to act on your behalf when you are mentally or physically incapacitated. It's separate from the will, and it goes into effect when? Before your death. And it should be very specific to the legal powers that it transfers. You don't write a power of attorney and give anybody the keys to the kingdom. You don't tell them, you don't allow them to do everything for you, but you make very specific caveats about what they should be able to do for you. Now, how many of you here, and I don't know if we might have talked about this last time that I was here, but how many of you here have heard of something called POD? POD. POD, you've heard of it. What does it stand for? Pay upon death. If you have an individual bank account, okay? This happens a lot. Ladies, go and check with your husbands tonight and make sure that if they have individual bank accounts. Men, go and check with your wives tonight. If you don't have a wife, get one and then ask her this question. Do you have me listed POD on your bank account? Why is this important? Because if you don't have a joint bank account, if you have a joint bank account, no problem. Anyone can access it. That's on the account. But if you don't have a joint bank account and your name's not listed POD, you can't access it until probate is over. Just to give you an idea, my great aunt who passed away, it took 4 years for her probate to finish. Why? Because one person in the family didn't like what was going on. All right? So that's an extreme case, but it can take that long. So you want to be able to access that money, to pay your bills, and to take care of what's necessary. Advanced Healthcare Directives, also known as a living will. It tells of your end-of-life wishes for healthcare. It's used when you're still alive, but you're unable to make the healthcare decisions on your own. Things like life support, things like quality of life, things like treatment, right? Those are all important things. The reason why you want to do this, as the fuqaha have stated, that your orders that you do tawkeel of, that you make someone an agent for you in, are like you doing them. So you don't want to make, if your family has this document and they say, if I am in a comatose or incapacitated state with less than 20% a possibility of survival, then order a DNR. Do not resuscitate. Now you've saved your family the agony of making that decision and thinking that they killed you, to say it that harshly. Because I have dealt with cases of people who would come up to me and they say, I had to make this decision for my father, for my mother, for my sister, for my uncle, and I feel like I'm the one that killed them. Don't leave your family in that situation. Allow them the peace of mind to say, I did what my mother or father wanted to do. You might say, well, how can I even allow for a DNR to be issued? This is something which is permissible if you feel that there's a greater reward involved. You're not going to prolong agony. The woman who used to have epilepsy and seizures during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, she came to him. What did she say? O Messenger of Allah, raise your hands and make dua for me. And ask Allah that He cure me of my seizures. He sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, In aradti da'utullahi laki wa in aradti sabarti walakil jannah. If you wish, I'll make dua for you. And if you wish, then you'll have patience and you will have Jannah. She said, then I'll have Jannah. At least make dua that I don't become uncovered. And so the Sahaba said the Prophet ﷺ made dua, and they would see her have a seizure in the middle of the street of Medina, and not a portion of her skin would become uncovered. So from this hadith, the ulama have said, it is permissible to leave off medical care if you do so out of tawakkul and hopes for a greater reward. But that's a decision you make for yourself. No one makes for you. So if that's your decision, that you don't want tubes, you don't want life support, make that decision, put it down on a piece of paper, let your family know. So there's an Islamic tradition of the family declaration, right? Or what we call wasiyah. You have the wasiyah of Imam al-Ghazali to his son, Ayyuha al-Walad. Beautiful books, recently translated. You have the wasiyah of Imam al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah. The wasiyah of Abu Hanifa. You have the wasiyah of Umar radiallahu anhu to his children. The wasiyah of Abu Bakr. You have the wasiyah of Abu al-Walid al-Baji. Right? You have all of these great scholars and luminaries of the past who would leave their family and they would say, when I pass away, don't wail over me. Don't tear your clothes or say things that were unfitting. Bury me as quickly as possible. Take me to the local cemetery. Don't take me anywhere else. When I pass, no one should raise their voice or hold a wake or do anything like that. Fear Allah. Keep up with your prayers. You want to tell your family the things that are too difficult or the reminders that they need at that time to inculcate in them the fact that you want them to consider or to continue your legacy of Iman after you have passed. You want to say the things in there that you can't say now, which makes it very important. So, here comes the important question. Bismillah. How do I get a will? Three options for getting a will. Use a holographic will. What does that mean? Does it mean, Princess Leia shows up and is holographic? Okay. Holographic will means you've written it down by hand. So if you don't have a will tonight, you get out a piece of paper and you say, I, mention your name, born of such and such date, live at this address, want this to happen after my death. Write it down. Sign it like you would sign one of your checks. Find an old voided check or bill or something like that, put it with it. Right? That is admissible into court in lieu of any other document. Now, it still has to go through the probate process. The judge is still going to say, okay, let me look at the signature, handwriting sample. Yes, looks the same. Family attests to this being what she wanted. Yes, it is. They'll accept it. But is that optimal? No, it's not optimal. Why? Because it can be challenged. Somebody can say, well, that's really old, or they didn't really write it, or somebody impersonated them. But if you do write it, you have to write all of it by hand. You can't type up part and then write part. All of it has to be written by hand. You can use a local lawyer and go to a local lawyer and say, give me a will. And the risk here for you as a Muslim is that you might not find a Muslim lawyer who understands all of the details of Islamic inheritance and can include them in a way that won't invalidate the document, because that's happened in the past. Poorly drafted documents can be thrown out of court, even probate court. So you want to make sure that it's drafted. Also, it can be very pricey. Why? Because a lawyer is billable hours and they're not working on these type of things all the time. The third option is you can use a service called mywasiya.com. Now, here is a disclaimer. I am one of the co-founders of mywasiya.com. Why did I start mywasiya.com with my partner, Muhammad Butaina? Because as a person, teacher in the community, people that come to for fatwa and questions, people will always come to me and say, can you write a will for me? And I say, well, I can, but I'm not a lawyer, so I can't draft it legally. And they would go to Muhammad and they would say, Muhammad, can you write a will? He said, well, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not a sheikh, so I can't do this. So we were having coffee one night after Salat al-Isha, and I was telling him, I'm so sorry. I'm like 20 minutes late getting in the car. This happened. He was like, man, that happens to me all the time. And so we said, well, why don't we create something that serves the majority of the community? This is a one-size-fits-most. 85% of the community can use this with no hiccups. It only takes you about 20 to 40 minutes to finish, front to back, and we'll make it reasonably priced. Instead of people being charged $500 to $1,000 to $10,000 for their will, we'll make it $125, something that's reasonable for everybody. And that's what we did. So you can go to the website here, go to mywasiya.com, easy, log on. Here in the middle of the page, you click Get Started Now. There in the middle of the page. Take the online interview. You put in your email and your name. This is what shows up. So it'll say, here's your personal information. What's your name? What's your email address? Here's a legal explanation of why we're asking this question. Here's an Islamic explanation of why we're asking this question. Finish all of that. Put in your credit card information. Pay the fee. Download the will. And then you can sign it in front of witnesses. There'll be full instructions of how to execute it properly. And that at any time, you can go back to your dashboard and you can download it again to print it out again, or you can make changes and amend it. And you can get other documents like the marital property agreement or the durable power of attorney or the other ones that we mentioned here. Some of them are online, some of them we're still developing. And you get this asset inventory document organizer, which you'll write a list of everything that you have, all of your important documents, that's for free, right? So you can access that at any time. And it's an easy way to be able to have a legally valid and Sharia compliant will. But you can go to a local lawyer, you can write a holographic will. The important thing that I want you to leave here tonight is do something. Don't allow yourself to become one of the 60% of Americans who doesn't have a will. And one of the 40%, right, of the remaining 40%, maybe half of them have an improperly drafted will. Don't become one of those statistics. Now, here's a link. If you sign up through this link, okay, mywasiya.com/King Fahd Mosque, you will get 20% off of the price of anything that you get from the site. And King Fahd Mosque will get a donation of $20. So you'll benefit the masjid that you pray in, and you'll benefit yourself. And so with that, we conclude. I hope that anything that I said that was of benefit, or anything that I said of benefit, is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and anything that I said that was a mistake is from me or from shaitan. And I ask you to forgive any slip-ups, and to pray for the organizers and the purveyors and the caretakers of this masjid, meaning yourself and all of those that you love and care for. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless each and every one of you. May He make you those who carry the legacy of Islam not only into the generations to come, but into the next life. And may He put barakah in all that you do and all that you own. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. And Shaykh Ahsan, are we going to do questions now, or is it salah time, or what are we doing? We can do a couple of questions and then pray, if that's okay. Do we have our elders' permission? Let's do the questions first, and we'll talk after. I'm here. I'm not racing off. Yes. I'm sorry, say that again. Yeah, so that's a great question. So a lot of people ask this. They say, well, what if I don't want to wait until I pass away? Can I give away my property now? And the answer is yes. In fact, and I want to make this point, the ratio, when we talked about the 7 different situations of people inheriting, we said that in 3 of them women inherit more, in 1 they inherit equal, and in 3 they inherit less. In those situations that inherit less, a lot of Muslims have the misconception that لِلذَّكَرِ مِثْلُ حَظِّ الْأُنْثَيَيْنِ, for the male that is the portion of 2 females. They have the misconception that that applies in everything, even in gifts that they give to their children, right? Whatever, even during their lifetime. The Prophet ﷺ said, "اعْدِلُوا بَيْنَ أَوْلَادِكُمْ." Be fair to all of your children. وَلَوْ كُنْتُ مُفَضِّلًا أَحَدًا لَفَضَّلْتُ الْبَنَاتِ. And if I were to prefer some, I would prefer my daughters, right? Or I would prefer daughters. So you can give gifts in your lifetime to whomever you want. You can give away everything that you own before you pass away. However, if you do that at a time when you're on your deathbed, then your inheritors have the right to claw that back, because you're doing it as a way to escape giving them inheritance. But if you make plans now to give away your wealth, create charities, create trusts, and you apportion those trusts to distribute the wealth as equally amongst whoever you wish, that's permissible. You can, yes, you can. Obviously, I mean, it will be if they are not over 18, you can put their name on the deed, but they won't manage it they won't have the ability to manage it until they're old enough. Yeah, and it might be more cost effective to you if you're going to have numerous people to look into a trust for that purpose. The brother here, then the brother here. Yes. What he was describing? That's good to know. Talk to him. He'll know more about taxes. Yes. Yes. Yeah. No, that's wrong. So the question was, if I give one of my children, say I give my daughter a gift early on in life, can I exclude her from inheritance because I already gave her in life? No, you cannot do that. Okay? It's not your choice to do that. You give a child a gift during your life, that's a gift to them. They still have a percentage that's due from them. You are not allowed to disenfranchise your inheritors, even if you don't like them, right? Even if you don't. And in fact, let me say this. Sometimes, ulama have said, sometimes it's better to give a little bit extra to the people that you especially don't like. You know why? Because you want to change their heart to make dua for you after your death, not to make dua against you. All right? So you have to keep your akhirah in mind when that comes. Yes. As I mentioned, yes, as long as at probate, when things are being distributed, the rest of the inheritors agree. It's conditional, yes. It's conditional. Yes. Yes. My pleasure. Of course. Of course, yes. I encourage everybody. Like I said, that if you have something that you can give away as a gift, give something to your local masjid. We're not going to live forever, and if we don't leave a legacy for our masajid, what is going to become of them? Many countries around the world, you see masjids that are boarded up and closed. Why? Because the communities didn't leave a legacy to care for them. If we're not going to care for them, then who will? Yes. 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 This is an excellent question. Thank you for asking it. So, if you have no one who is eligible to inherit from you, either because you have no remaining relatives or you have no eligible relatives, whether you're a convert or not, right? So let's say, for example, your parents have passed away, you have no siblings, and you never got married, you never had children, right? What do you do with your money in that situation? I'll take your question next. What do you do with your money in that situation? Well, in that situation, it is permissible for you to give the entirety of it in charity. You can donate it to the mosque. But you can do, other charities exist too. I'm saying the masjid and other things, right? And that's an excellent question. Thank you for asking it. Yes, sister. Uh-huh. That's correct. Mm. So that's an excellent question. So the question is, if I give my child a gift during their lifetime, will I be questioned for not treating my children equally in the next life? Right? Now, the idea of justice between your children is not necessarily proportionate to the amount of money that you give them. I'll give you an example. If I have a child who is going to a top-tier university where the tuition is, say, for example, $5,000 a semester. I live in Texas. I don't know about California, right? You're like, 5,000, what kind of community college are your kids going to? I'm in Texas. God bless Texas, okay? It's still relatively cheap. So, and then one of my other child wants to go to a community college where they're only going to pay, say, $2,000, right? It's not unjust. I don't have to say give an extra $3,000 to my other child Because the justice is me paying for their education, not in the cent by cent allocation of that, right? So I paid for your education, I paid for your education, each of them in proportion to what their needs were. Just as the same with food at home. I'm mandated to feed all of my children, right? Sometimes you wish you weren't mandated to feed your children because they eat too much, but you're mandated to feed all your children. But you have one child, mashallah, that will just eat you out of house and home, and the other child eats like a bird, right? But as long as you've given them the ability to eat, then that's the obligation, that's the justice. And you're not responsible for the differences that are there in consumption. So that inshallah won't apply then. Again, your lifetime gifts are not included in your will, right? So your will, they'll all take in proportion to what Allah has mentioned. But if you give gifts during your lifetime, that's not included, right? Now, the only caveat I will mention here, and I'll mention it again. I think I mentioned it last time, but I'll mention it here again. How many of you here have a 401k, right? Or something similar, 403b, or whatever the other ones are, right? Any type of defined retirement. Please go home tonight. Make sure that your beneficiary documents are proper, that you have written down your family's names, right? And that it'll go to them or a trust that you've designated or something. Because if you don't, then it's going to be harder for them to get that money. And as I think I've mentioned before, there's been people who started their career married to one person and ended their career married to another person and never changed their beneficiary documents. And guess who got the money? The ex-wife. So you can imagine what kind of dua was being made at that time. Okay? So check your beneficiary documents and make sure that it's all in order. The brother here, because he hasn't taken a question. That is an excellent question. So if you have a trust or you have some property in another country, then your wasiyah here, it will be enough. But you need to put the ithbatat. You need to have some form of documentation that you put with it. Just keep it in the same place. So that way the people know that we can take this wasiyah and go to that home country and say, this is his signature and everything is taken care of. Unless there's anybody else, yes. Yes. That's a good question. So the question is, if someone has haram earnings, is it permissible for you as an inheritor or even as just a beneficiary of that person in their lifetime to take gifts from them or take maintenance from them or sustenance? This is a principle that Al-Hafidh ibn Abd al-Barr mentions in a Tamheed, and that is اختلاف اليد يستلزم اختلاف الحكم. The changing of hands mandates the changing of the rule. What do I mean by that? This is based on the hadith of Barira, or the hadith of Aisha about Barira radiallahu anha in the Sahih, that Barira was a manumitted slave woman. She was a slave woman who then Aisha bought her freedom, and she would live amongst the Muslims. She was elderly. She didn't have a way to earn for herself. So people would go and give her sadaqah, and then she would eat from that sadaqah. She was a free woman now. She was too old to work, right? So she would eat she would eat from that sadaqah. One day, someone gave her some meat, sadaqah meat. She made a burma, right? She made this pot of spicy meat, cooked it, sent it to the Prophet ﷺ's house. The Prophet ﷺ, when it was brought inside his house, he smelt it. He was so like enticed by the meat. He immediately opened. He started to eat. Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, "O Messenger of Allah, that was given to Barira as sadaqah. What's the problem?" No, what's the problem? The Prophet cannot eat sadaqah. It's haram for the Prophet to eat sadaqah like it's haram for one of us to eat pork. So Aisha said, "Oh, Messenger of Allah, Ya Rasulullah, إنها تصدق بها على بريرة. It was given to Barira as sadaqah. So he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إنها لها صدقة ولنا هدية. It was sadaqah to her, but it was a gift to us. So if I pull out $2 from my pocket and I say, guess which one I earned through gambling today? You won't know. I have one that I earned through selling something halal, one third that I earned through selling something haram. I give you one of those dollars, you are in no way, shape, or form morally responsible for what I earned, right? So to answer your question, based on that principle, if a person takes that wealth, right, then it is halal for them to take, right? It is permissible for them to take. And I will say this, if you know that not taking that money, it will end up in the wrong hands, meaning in other people's hands who will use it for haram, then it becomes almost an obligation for you to do it. And this is a principle called istinqadh al-amwal, to save wealth from falling into the wrong hands. And again, because you mentioned that you're a convert, this applies to converts. And this was the fatwa of Muawiyah and Mu'adh radiallahu anhu and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari and others of the Sahaba for the converts that were in Yemen and Syria when their non-Muslim family died. It was better for you to take that inheritance than to leave it for those who would then use it for the sin, to sin against Allah and His Messenger, or for something or even more nefarious. And my voice is about to go out, so you're the last question. I don't see the connection, but I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. It's a little bit too extensive for us to talk about right now, but I see your point. But in general, organ donation is permissible, but it should be a non-vital organ, not something that's not going to kill you if it's taken away from you. Even if it's after and if you donate an organ after death, then that's in my opinion, the stronger of the two opinions. Some ulama say it's not permissible at all after death. Some of them say that it is. I hold the opinion or follow the scholars that say that it is. And that does become an ethical question then, as to who that organ will end up to. So that's something we'd have to discuss further at that time. So, Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا